Hello, my cupcakes, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond Reasonable Doubt. My name is Misty Sims, and I'm so glad that you guys found me here on my little corner of the internet. If you are a returning subscriber, then you know I'm so happy to have you here, and I love you so much, and thank you for showing up and listening to some things that I have to say. If you're new here, this is a safe space where we discuss all things true crime, culty, and the truly unspeakable and heinous. This is a reminder that this video is for entertainment purposes only, and this is just information that I have found on the internet or various news resources and have compiled into one place. So please remember to do your own research about any of these topics that we discuss. And as always, please remember to be kind in the comments. I love to hear what you have to say. I love to hear your opinion, not only about what the case is, the outcome, how I'm presenting the material to you, but just remember that we could have family members and friends of the individuals that we speak about down in the comment section below. So let's always choose to be kind and welcome them with open arms if they are here to discuss anything that we have going on. Today's case is a long one, so I will warn you ahead of time. You're going to be here with me for a while, so grab a snack, grab a drink, grab anything of choice. It is a heavy one, and there's a lot to unpack. I will be referring to my notes a lot, so if you see me glancing down, there is a lot of material to go over, so that is why I want to try to get these facts as accurate as possible for the information that I have been able to research. So I will refer to that quite often, but let's dive right on in. Good morning. Today's case is one that has gotten some media attention lately. Not so much for the case that itself, because it happened a few years ago, but with the Idaho Four case that I'm sure everyone has heard about, and Bryan Kohlberger, who is our suspect in that case. This case has resurfaced as some facts that have come out about Bryan. So it has been alleged that Bryan is what they refer to as an incel. And none of this is known as true, so let's be very clear that we are alleging all of this today. He is also innocent until proven guilty in that case, so we will cover Bryan in detail if you guys would like that. I think a lot of creators have kind of done that case to death, and until we get to the trial and a lot of facts are going to come out, the more that the gag order is lifted, there may not be a whole lot more that we can cover, but if you guys would like to hear me do a deep dive on the Idaho Four as what we know today, I'll be happy to do that. But one fact that like I was saying, that has come out several times is that Bryan is an incel. And if you don't know what an incel is, we'll talk about that first. But there is a gentleman's name who is often referred to as I don't want to say a martyr, but I don't know another word either to use there, but someone who is very often referred to with this community, and that is Elliot Rodger. Now, Elliot has resurfaced lately because there was talk during the Idaho Four case of a account that was being used in various forums on the internet to discuss the Idaho Four called Papa Rodger. To be clear, it was spelled differently than Elliot's last name, but people believe that this could have been an homage to Elliot, referencing his last name. There's no proof that this was Bryan. A lot of folks believe that because the Papa Rodger account seemed to know a lot of facts about the case that hadn't been released to the public at the time. Just a lot of insightful things, asking people, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? And things like that. So it just sort of started to culminate and bring back to surface, well, who is this Elliot Rodger kid that people keep talking about in relation to this Papa Rodger account? How could this relate to Bryan Kohlberger, and how could this relate to the Idaho Four? And then what the heck did Elliot Rodger even do? Because if you're like me, I wasn't as involved in the true crime community at the time that Elliot committed the acts that he committed, so I was unfamiliar with the case and who he was. So I had to go do some research and some digging on my own. And I mean, buckle up, cupcakes, because this one is heavy. This is a lot to take in. But first, I think what we need to do probably is talk about what an incel truly is. Now, I'm not going to get in just great detail about it. mainly because this community does have some sensitivity around it, I feel like. But for the most part, incel stands for involuntarily celibate. So it is a person, an individual. It looks like to me it's fairly common for this to be males in these groups. Someone please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, if there are females involved as well. But it looks like it does center around males, and they feel that they are unable to attract women. They're unable to find a partner in life. They're unable to maintain relationships, and they are extremely angry because of this. And sometimes that does cause them to act out towards the women that they cannot attract, or women as a whole, and also men who happen to be in active and happy relationships. They don't like that either, and they will sometimes act out towards them. Now, I want to quote this as the National Library of Medicine published an article that describes incels to report more depressive and anxious symptoms and experience a larger feeling of isolation and a greater fear of being alone than non-incels. So there is, a lot of mental anguish going on in this community. And that article goes on to discuss that they endorse problematic coping strategies and are typically in an extreme case of frustration. So, a lot of, I think, anxiety, depression, and things like that that come along with this feeling, which is understandable if you feel isolated, if you feel alone. I think that's understandable that you could feel, very anxious, depressed, all these things. It's the extreme acts that tend to get them in the news and have made this, I guess, a household name or situation, as you may call it. There's been a lot of acts linked to this community. The one thing I struggled to find was a lot of references in the media, when I would look these cases up, that the media talked back about these people being involuntary celibate or an incel. I did not see a ton of info around that and linking them to a quote unquote group, or wherever they gather on the internet, because they are a kind of a sub community out there on the internet. I didn't see a lot of that, and I question why we're not talking about it. If it's true, if we could prove these facts and prove that they are linked, and I mean, internet activity alone would have proved that, right? Your internet activity is a footprint about like DNA nowadays. It's very telling. I don't know why we wouldn't link them together, so we could see red flags, follow someone's activity on the internet and see what they're doing, and maybe get them some help or some mental therapy or whatever they might need. But I don't know. I'm just a lady on the internet with a camera and too much to say, right? So who knows? But one that sticks out, there's a couple that stick out, and we'll get to Elliot in just a second. But just talking about a few others that have been linked to this community is one such as George Sedini. I don't know if you guys remember him, but back in 2009, August of 2009, he opened fire at a Planet Fitness. He killed 3 women and injured 9 more people before he turned his weapon on himself. And sometimes now there are acts that are called going Sedini in this community, and that means, we're about to run out there and do something extremely explosive, extremely large in magnitude to other people based on our feelings about being an incel. So kind of keep that mindset in the back of your head as we go through this story. You can Google several more. There are a lot of them linked out there, and it surprised me how many people were talking about being linked to this community. You can even go to like Wikipedia and see it. And I know some people have feelings about whether Wikipedia is accurate or not, but you can look at it and see that there have been several. So it's definitely out there. Elliot is a young man who sticks out very large in this community. They look at him as kind of an idol, so to speak, for lack of a better word, as he was what they call the supreme gentleman. Now, if you go to commit certain acts now too, instead of saying going Sedini, you might also say, hey, gonna go to the ER tonight. And that means, going Elliot Rodger out here. And when we get to what all Elliot did in this story, in this case, you're going to find out just what magnitude that carries and how scary that truly is. So, let's start peeling this onion back. So get a stuffed animal if you need one, because it does get pretty heavy. And I think you're going to go through probably the same thing I did as we talk through this. And there's just a magnitude of emotions as you go through this. So We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. I'm going to try to stick to the facts as we talk through this as much as I can, not let my opinion come out till the end, so that way if you don't care about my opinion, you can stop the video at that point. So, all right, so who was Elliot? What's this kid all about? And I say kid because he committed these acts at a very young age. He was an adult at the time, but a very young adult. So Elliot Oliver Robertson Rodger was born on July 24th of 1991 in the UK to his parents. His parents' names were Peter and Lee Chin, and his father was a British photographer and filmmaker and had a pretty lucrative career. I think he had some film failures, but for the most part, he had a lucrative career and even worked on the Hunger Games as part of the production team. So, I mean, that's a pretty big deal, right, to work on the Hunger Games. Mom, Lee Chin, was of Chinese descent, but she was born in Malaysia. And I read a couple of conflicting things, but it sounds like she was a nurse and then she was also working on the production sets, and that's how she met his father. So I'm not sure if she was a nurse on the set or if she had taken another job at the time. But either way, she also had a career herself. They had Elliot, of course, and he would also have one younger sister by his biological parents whose name was Georgia. And she was born on Elliot's 5th birthday. His grandfather, whose name was George Rodger, and George had made quite the name for himself as a photographer and a photojournalist all around the UK and around the world. And Elliot's manifesto, which we will go through in great detail as we go through this, it's about 141 pages long, so quite a lot of detail in there. He states that his birth was an accident, that his parents didn't plan his being born, and he states this a couple different times in the manifesto, that his mother was taking birth control pills, but she had fallen ill, so she was on a certain medication that counteracted the birth control and made it not work, and that's how he came to be. You know, I found that a little strange, I guess, that his parents shared that information with him, and I didn't know the context and I wasn't there for it, but you know, I would think if you're told repeatedly by your parents that you were an accident, that could have some effects on you. I don't know, but as we read through the manifesto, I think you may be able to see that it did. Like, he was impacted throughout his life by several things that people would say and do. And I don't know how they told him. You know, if they told him, hey, you know, no, you know, if he asked, you know, did you guys want me or whatever, and they could say, well, you know, you were an accident, or not planned, I guess, not an accident, not planned, but, you know, God or the universe or whatever their belief system was intervened, and we're so happy that we had you, and they knew, you know, it knew that we were missing something huge in our lives. But either way, that it doesn't sound like maybe that's how he internalized it and how he absorbed it, for him to keep mentioning this in the manifesto. So I kind of feel like that was a start of his despair, maybe. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think as we go through this. You can comment below. But anyway, so note that he was not a planned incident in his family's life. But it sounds like, honestly, his childhood starting out was fairly pleasant. I didn't really see a whole lot of red flags as he was younger. He had made some friends as a child. He had one female friend who we'll get into a little bit later, but that will actually be very kind of crucial and a turning point, because it was the only female friend he would have in his life. His dad spent some time with him, taught him how to fly kites, took him outside. Elliot stated that, you know, one of his favorite movies to watch as a kid was The Land Before Time, and that one hit home with me because, I mean, who didn't love Littlefoot, right? I mean, from him, you know, his you crying when his mom died versus, you know, celebrating happy tears when he got to the Great Valley. So that one I got, and I totally understood kind of where he was coming from as a kid, because that was one of my favorite movies as well. And, you know, he describes how well traveled he was. His parents did a great, you know, job of exposing him to the world and cultures, and taking him to, I think it was, I don't remember if it was 5 or 6 countries before he even turned 5 years old, but several countries. You know, he just got to see a lot of things that other kids, you know, might not get to see until they're older. It was just a whole lot going on. He had this sweet little grandmother who it just sounded like was just, you know, I'm Southern, so the typical mama that's out there, you know, she's picking berries with him, she's taking him on walks, she's always making sure he's got his favorite cookies when he comes over to the house. So typical grandma experience. But yeah, it sounded like he had a pretty typical kid upbringing, nothing too major. He didn't necessarily like all of the, going to school and school uniform kind of things because he was required to wear uniforms at his primary school that he was attending. But nothing crazy, at that point, nothing too off the spectrum here of what would be, normal kid behavior, normal kid feelings. Um, Eventually, though, his family would leave the UK and immigrate here to the United States into the Los Angeles area. Like I said, his dad worked in films and film production, so it made sense for them to be here in kind of the mecca of everything that happens in filmmaking in the United States. And when he got here to the United States, he would make that one friend that I referred to, and her name is Maddie. And he grew really close to Maddie, and they maintained this friendship for quite some time. I think about 14 years of his life that he was close to Maddie, maybe give or take a little bit there. And then he would also meet a few other boys here that he would maintain friendships with for a while. But about the time he turned 6, so still pretty, this pretty young child here that we're talking about, he started to have some insecurities because he noticed that he was a lot smaller than the other boys in his class and the other kids. And that kind of caused him some angst. And I get that, I have a son myself. And, kids start comparing themselves to others around that age and start noticing, not necessarily like, gross differences or anything like that, but they do start to question things. So totally understandable. And what kind of brought this to the forefront for Elliot was that they took a trip to Universal Studios and he wanted to ride the Jurassic Park ride. And he was too short. And he threw just a heck raising fit here, crying on the ground, that type of thing, temper tantrum, need to be comforted by his mom, which for 6, some kids are still there emotionally to throw the tantrum. Some are even more so at that point as they're, I think, growing from, little bitty kid into now a little older kid. But this kind of marks the tipping point where he starts to really just feel this inadequacy. And I think it was a lot more heavy on his heart or mine than it would be, what we would think, because he put this in the manifesto, right? Like it clearly stuck out in his mind because he didn't start writing this manifesto at 6 years old. He started writing it as he was older, and he still was reflecting back on how inadequate this made him feel. So I feel like, this was pivotal in his life. But about the time he turned 7, he would go through something else a little tumultuous, and that would be that Peter and Lee Chin would divorce. And obviously, parents get a divorce every day, and kids are heavily affected by that. But for him, there was a lot of anger towards, I think, his parents, in particular his mother, just because she had told him before when he was questioning this. I'm not sure why he was questioning it, if it was just because they were having problems or if it was because another friend's parents had gotten a divorce. But she had reassured him that nothing like this would ever happen in their household, and then here it is happening. And, he was just very resentful over that, which, probably could be understood. Kids can be very heavily impacted by parents splitting up, but, most tend to hopefully bounce back. But, he was resentful enough to put it in the manifesto again. So there was a lot of change going on, moving from houses, a lot of financial setbacks, both on his father's side, which caused them to lose their childhood home. Mom's now having to move because she moved out of the house, and she moves a lot in this. And that's not a dig at Lee Chin. I mean, she's trying to provide a roof over the head of her children. However, she is having to make a lot of changes as her financial situation changes. So he's got a lot of change going on. But then there's one that just really, kicks him into high gear. And that is when his dad brings home, a few months after the divorce, a new friend, who he calls a friend, who ends up becoming stepmother. And that was a big one for Elliot. That was a not okay. I do not pass go, do not collect $200. Her name was Sumaya. She was a Moroccan actress and model. And Elliot he wasn't a fan. He wasn't a fan of Sumaya. He wasn't a fan of the things that she made him do. He wasn't a fan of her. I think she made him drink milk for breakfast and eat, I guess, foods from her diet, Moroccan diet. He did not care for these. Just a lot, going on where he didn't really care for her. And I understand, the dynamics changing again, changing over and over. But it does sound like Sumaya was trying her best to step in as the role of stepmother when he was at her house, and he just wasn't having it. So a lot of problematic things going on there. Um, but he kind of carried on, made a new friend at school that he really had kind of maintained a friendship with up till he was this age, and then going forward. And that was where he kind of found some solace. His name was James. They would get together and they would play video games. They would play Pokemon. They would play, just things you would expect of a 7-year-old. My son is 9, and he was definitely into these things at 7 and still is today. So very typical kid, even though he's going through some emotional things. Typical actions with his friend. But y'all, it's going to go downhill quick from here. So just hang with me. He steps us through kind of each year of his life in the manifesto. And like I said, it's 141 pages long, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you. You can read it out there for yourself, but it is long. So I'm going to try to just highlight some big things that I thought were important and threw a red flag for me. He really spends a lot of time in this manifesto wanting to highlight to people that are reading it how privileged he was. How he was living his life. He's eating lobster for his birthday. His mom is friends with George Lucas, so he's going to Star Wars premieres and things like that other people aren't getting to do. He wants you to understand, like, look how metropolitan I am. Look at what all I have. Look at, if you guys can hear that, my cat's trying to get in the room with me, so he's shaking the door. I'll probably let him in a minute, but I apologize if you hear the background noise. But he's just building on this idea of that I have a social status. It's here, and you need to understand that. And at a young kid's age, that seems to be kind of strange, but keep it in your back pocket. Because it costs is braggish, so just kind of keep that in your head. By the time he was about 8 years old, his mom has said that he was seeing therapists and being evaluated for mental illness, and that he had been prescribed some medications as a result of this, but he wouldn't take them, I guess because of the way they made him feel. When I read the manifesto, it sounded like this occurred later in life, but with the mom's interviews, it said it occurred then. So I'm going to go with those interviews because I feel like those are probably factual. We can't, you'll see, we can't ask Elliot when we get to the end of this why we can't ask Elliot what's going on, but he didn't mention it until much later. But either way, he wasn't taking medications like he should have been, or that he was prescribed by the doctor. That his mother felt like that he was probably suffering from Asperger's. He was never formally diagnosed with this, but I'm going to err on the side of mom because I feel like sometimes we know our children best. So if she could see, maybe it wasn't exactly that, but she knew he had something going on, and she was trying to get him help, right? And doctors were probably not as familiar with it at the time, so it wasn't formally diagnosed. But you will see that he definitely suffers from something as we go through this, and I think mom knew best here that we needed to probably pursue something to try to get him some help. By the time he was 9, he was just experiencing even more turmoil with Sumaya. As I said, nothing had changed. He still didn't like the way she was trying to make him do certain things, eat certain things, maintain a diet. And he was really, or I said diet, not like he was on a diet to lose weight, but just, try to eat a nutritious meal that she was preparing. He didn't like anything she was doing. She is not going to do any right by him in this whole thing, according to him, okay? So just know that up front. He was also starting to go through a lot of jealousy over kids. I keep saying and I need to stop that. Y'all get me. That's a bad habit. You can drill me for it in the comments because I need to stop that. But he was going through a lot of just extreme jealousy. He was wanting to spend more time with mom than dad. He didn't want to be at his dad's. A lot of that was Sumaya. A lot of that was that his dad wouldn't side with him over Sumaya. And then his mom coddled him a lot, and I don't mean that as a dig at her whatsoever. She knew what he wanted, and she would make sure it happened, and he liked that. And who doesn't, right? We all want to, we want our way all the time. So I like to spend time with mom. And he really started noticing what would be called the cool kids at this point at school, and that there was a difference in the way that he was being perceived and the way that they were being perceived. And this really, really stuck out to him. He started changing his appearance to try to be cooler. Like he wanted to bleach his hair, like the tips and things that, I think if you grew up in the 90s, you knew somebody with the frosted tips in their hair. He started trying to skateboard more, which he loved, but he quickly gave it up because he would see like younger kids who were better than him at it and could do more tricks. And he was just like, well, if I'm not going to be the best, I'm not going to do it at all. And then he, would just get angry when, girls would pay more attention to certain boys that he perceived as like bullies. It was just a lot going on here in his mind that he was internalizing to feel less than other kids at school, and that they weren't noticing him for, what he was doing. And when he started middle school, I think this is really where you see a turn where he emotionally is having a lot of fear, and he documents this: a lot of fear, a lot of anxiousness over the new places, trying to forge new relationships with girls, with other boys in school. It was just really very scary for him. But the one thing that he does document in here that I'm going to highlight, because it is the part that makes him seem very human to me, was James's mother passed of breast cancer. And you'll remember James is his best friend. And he imagines what it would be like without his own mother and if she passed. And he really is empathetic for James and hurts for him, and explains that would hurt him if he didn't have his mother. And I think we see that a little glimpse of humanity in him, and we don't see that a lot as we progress through the story. So I do want to highlight that one portion, that at least around this time in his life, around 10 to 11 years old, you do see that he understands loss, and he's starting to process what those feelings could feel like. I'm not sure if that makes it better or more scary as we progress through this, but I at least wanted to note that. So, he's not making a lot of friends now at his middle school. He had separated from the friends that he had, so he and James weren't in the same school anymore. So he's trying to make friends with the school bully just so he won't bully him, but that kind of backfires because his mother invites his new friend over to her house, and Elliot is not happy with the house because he feels like it's on the poorer side of town and is small and all this type of stuff. So he doesn't really want him to come over. Well, mom invites him over. Lee Chen's trying to do the right thing, make friends, and, she's going to probably have him some Kool-Aid and cookies or something, just to entertain him in the afternoon. And the bully goes back to school and, makes fun of Elliot for having less of a house or being on the poor side of town and things like that. And I mean, not cool, dude. Not cool at all. Not defending Elliot, because he definitely is indefensible, I think, by the end of this, but, don't be that kid. Don't be a bully, and don't make fun of people for having less. That is not a good look for anybody. So, bullies out there, take note. It's not cool. So stop it right now. So Elliot goes on to try to make some friends. And this is about the time in the past where AOL Messenger gets popular. And I don't know if you guys remember that. Maybe I'm dating myself here, but I know I definitely had an AIM screen name. I am quite certain something embarrassing, like Blondie129 or something dumb. I don't know what it was, but we all did that back in the day where we would chat with our friends and we would do things, and it was fun. It was a new way to express yourself. It was a way to not have to be on the corded phone, right? Because we didn't all have cordless phones back then. We certainly didn't have cell phones, so you could chat with your friends and kind of just everybody's not hearing what you're saying and that type of stuff. So things are kind of going along. He's got these friends on chat. And then a male friend sends him a photo of a woman unclothed. Most young teenagers are just gonna be like, dude, yeah, look at that, get feeling some kind of way about it, like it's the coolest thing ever, right? Because they're hiding, adult magazines under their bed at that point probably, or at some point in the future. I don't know what age. I'm not a teenage, never been a teenage boy, so I don't know when that starts. But Elliot goes into this point of fear and trauma that he's having this loss of his childhood. Not something that the typical kid's going to experience, I don't think. but it's very impactful for him. I mean, it was just like he couldn't talk to this guy anymore. He wouldn't be friends with him anymore. He was just done. He cut him off. So kind of odd behavior here, but okay, what don't know what to tell him there, but he really was traumatized over this. But throughout all this, he's his stepmother is pushing him in middle school to try to make friends, more friends, pushing him towards going out and playing, pushing him towards socializing. And then they do something that just sets him over the edge, and they send him to this like 4-week summer camp. And he's pissed. He doesn't want to go to this camp. He don't want to do this, but here he finds himself because at middle school age, we have to do what our parents say, basically, right? They drop you off, there you are. So he goes, and he's kind of get along, sees this pretty girl, and he thinks she's cute as a button. Well, he's not going to tell her because he's at that age too. Regardless of how this all turns out, at middle school age, we're all awkward. He's not going to say anything. So he bumps into her at one point accidentally, and she flips around, and I think she curses him, calls him a name or something, which not something she should be doing. That's not okay to behave that way. But for him, he says that literally ruined his life at that point. And I mean, that's big, right? I mean, that is a big thing. And for the record, if anything like that ever happens to you, don't let that ruin your life. Don't let somebody else, a garbage truck that runs through your life and dumps garbage like that, don't let it ruin your life. It's not worth it by any means. You probably won't ever even see this person again, just like he didn't. So don't let it ruin your life. There's your public service announcement for the day. But for Elliot, it did. And he never got over this. And it was very clear in the manifesto of how this just messed with his head, right? So we're seeing this just downward spiral to the point where now that he's hit 12 at this point, which is a very, awkward age anyway, he finds himself playing a ton of online games and video games and online gaming. Loves it. I think that's typical for any teenager, that might find themselves in the gaming world. They love it. His mom buys him everything from a Nintendo 64 all the way up to an Xbox. Gets him a computer, gets really into RPGs, role-playing games, really loves World of Warcraft, and he's just comfortable in this environment. So he's kind of finding his place to belong, right? And a little bit of a sanctuary. Plays hours on end, and then starts going down to a cyber cafe so that he can play the games. I think, if I'm understanding it correctly from what I read, these are a little higher speed computers so he could play, be a little quicker. Any of us that's ever experienced dial-up or anything like that, what was going on there. So he goes down there, and then he sees this older kid. I guess the way that the cyber cafes were positioned, you could sit behind someone else and see what they were doing on their computer. And this older teenager is looking at adult content online. And Elliot just goes into a tailspin. He is so just traumatized by this, and he is just feeling some kind of way. And he uses the word traumatized a lot, okay? It is a recurring theme through the manifesto. And he is just really upset by it, and he expresses that even though he feels the desires that other boys feel when they look at females. So if you're a male attracted to a female, he is feeling the way that they would feel. But he is hurt because it goes unfulfilled. He's not experiencing any kind of relationship with females. He's not having any kind of boyfriend, girlfriend. He's not going to ever grow up to have any type of intimacy with them, and it's just weighing heavy on him, and he is just humiliated by it and by the whole thing. So, very, very isolated, very upset by this. And then he experiences another trauma in around the same age when his mom moves to what he calls a humiliating environment. It was an apartment, y'all. She moved to an apartment. This poor lady is putting a roof over his head, buying him all these gaming systems and all that type of stuff, and he is just madder than heck at her, madder than a stinking wet hen, because she moved into an apartment. I'm just gonna leave that alone. Okay, she's putting a roof over his head. Just leave it alone. But he's having a tough time he's trying to maintain friendships with James because he can play online with him, but he's, that's still not that connection that you would normally have with somebody. So he's feeling just shut down, isolated. He's in this apartment he doesn't like. Things are just not going well for him. And he's starting to be bullied more and more at school because he's coming across as the weird kid as he's growing up through the teenage years. His classmates have said that this isn't true, that he never wanted to be friends with them, even when they tried. So who knows there? But in his mind, he's having a tough time. He develops his first crush, and, that just, he has a love-hate relationship with that because he's out there saying that, this young girl, she teased him and she was cruel to him. And I'm not going to put her name out there, but you don't have to look far and hard on the internet to find it because he says it in the manifesto. And she's received hate and a lot of ugly messages and things like that from folks in the incel community. And I mean, y'all, this was when they were like 13 years old. I'm not saying it's okay for her to tease him. It's not okay to tease anybody. Don't do that. It's a bad look. Like, you just do you and don't worry about what somebody else is doing. But most kids at that age have experienced that in some way. Most kids are, I don't even remember much about being 13 except that I was awkward. I had bad bangs, I had braces, I was kind of chubby. I had a bad perm, I did just a whole nine. I was a mess. And I grew out of it. And we all just kind of, we make our questionable fashion choices at that age and we do our weird thing, and then we grow up and we figure out who we are. We're finding ourselves. But for him, this would be a prelude to the rest of his life. He would never get past any of this stuff. So it's all just snowballing from everything that we've talked about so far. By the time he gets to high school, he requests to go to an all-boys school so that way he doesn't have to interact with the girls anymore, that he thinks that's going to save him from at least part of this problem that he's experiencing. But that's not super palatable because the upperclassmen just, they are hazing the heck out of him like they tend to do younger kids. And again, bad look, don't do that, but it does happen. So he begs his parents to switch schools, so he does. He goes to a public high school. That's way worse. That couldn't be any worse, right? You got girls there, you got all these things. It's just terrible. So he finally ends up going to a small high school that, I don't have any experience with these type of schools, but it sounds like the kids could go there. It's almost like a local version of like homeschooling, because they were allowed to get their work done in say 3 to 4 hours a day and then leave, right? So kind of similar to what homeschool would be. But he spent most of his time playing video games when he would get home, and not doing things outside of the video games to me that really spoke to what a 16-year-old now at the time kid would be doing. He didn't want to get his license because he didn't want to grow up. He was scared of driving. Not because he's scared to drive. I was scared to drive. I should probably still be scared to drive the way I drive. But he just didn't want to lose that part of being a kid. And then something that I thought was weird, not weird, but just different, spoke a lot to his maturity level, was that at 16, he was saying that he would still have James over for play dates to play video games and stuff, but he called it a play date. Most people at 16 are not still referring to outings with their friends as play dates. So that stuck out to me, like maybe where we were mentally. But, again, he's not wanting to leave his childhood behind. So this is probably a common term for him and a common reference. So the manifesto weaves in and out a lot of him finishing high school and going in and out of playing World of Warcraft. So he would, and I'm not saying World of Warcraft like I think that had any contribution to this, so let me be very clear to the makers of World of Warcraft, and I think was it Blizzard Entertainment, that had anything to do with that. But he kept referencing this game because he loved it so much. But he would ebb and flow in and out of playing it, because I guess you can talk back and forth to people, or like maybe there's a message board in it or not. I've never played the game, so I don't know this, but there was somewhere where he could see like a local repository of chat messages, and people would be discussing their intimate encounters and their escapades and things like that teenagers are going to talk about, and it made him feel uncomfortable. So sometimes he would just cut the game off and not play for a while, and then he might go back to it, and that type of thing. But I do think that it's sad that, he felt he could even be comfortable in something that he loved because he was so intimidated by what other people were saying. Um, his hatred for women grew around this time. So he's a typical teenage guy, I think, or teenager, period. And he's experienced a very high drive to be intimate with another person. In his case, women. He is just extremely like high on life there, like got it, wanna. But he couldn't even approach women. He couldn't go out and talk to the opposite sex. And I found this funny, not haha funny, just odd. And like I said, I've watched videos of him. I'm not going to drop any of the video footage in here, just because this is sensitive, I feel like, and I'm not going to drop it. But you can Google it and find old YouTube videos and things like that. I mean, I think YouTube's taken most of them down, but people captured them, things like that. But he wasn't an uninteresting person. He loved Game of Thrones for what it was back in the day. It was still a book then, and the series was just starting to come out. He liked gaming. He liked Star Wars. I mean, this is things that like a lot of folks like. I mean, maybe I'm showing the nerd in me, but I love that stuff. Outside of World of Warcraft, which I've never played, I do love. I'm just not a gamer, but I love Star Wars. I love Game of Thrones. I love all that type of stuff. And these are all the things that, he just really, really liked. But he never would approach anyone and try to show them his authentic self and talk about it. And if you're not going to approach somebody, you can't be pissed off that they don't want to talk to you, And he's sitting there and he's mad because he's like, people don't care that I'm well traveled, that my mom knows George Lucas, that I'm doing all these things. But you're not making the effort to. And it's a two-way street, I feel like, especially for, introverts of the world. It's very hard for us, and I'm speaking about myself, it's very hard for us to go out and talk to people as well. So kind of got to meet in the middle and, whatever. But he wasn't interested in doing that. So, I mean, I don't know. I think, I don't know, y'all. I'm giving part of my opinion there, and I don't mean to, but I really do think that, if you give people the opportunity to like you for who you are, they will. And if they don't give a rip about them. Move on and find yourself a friend group that will. But anyways, the manifesto carries on for several more pages past this, where he's taking college classes. He finally does get his license, so good for him in college, finally does that. But he is having crying fits and tantrums on the way home because he would see couples walking down the street and holding hands. And he is suffering, his words, because of this, because he's never going to have this, and they're flaunting it in his face. So a lot of hopelessness and despair here. He goes on to try karate and things like that, and nothing's working. His anxiety is becoming just straight up crippling for him, to the point where his writings just get very dark around this time, and talking about the time of his life. He also talks a lot about the relationship that he's reforged with his father and stepmother, who have now had a child of their own at this point, who is 5. And he talks about how much he loves his stepbrother and how excited he was for him to come into his life, until he starts noticing that his stepbrother has some of the same tendencies that he dislikes other people for. He is, charismatic and just becoming the little boy that he never was, I guess. And talking about how jealous he is of him. And this little boy is only 5 or 6 at this point. So put that in perspective as we go through this. He starts, just doing things that were out of the norm, I think, to try to be able to talk to people. He starts going out and trying to sit around and, like, I guess, hover in places and get people to talk to him, and he's still not having any girls approach him. He's still not having things like that, pop up on him. He's not having girls, reach out to him. And he's just very angry when he sees all these other people out there with beautiful girls, beautiful people, and he can't get anyone, even though he's this cosmopolitan type dude. And I guess he's never heard the whole saying that beauty's only skin deep, but whatever. He ends up dropping college classes because he can't stand seeing a pretty girl that he likes and her boyfriend together. And it's not that they've ever even spoken, it's not anything like that. just a lot going on. And then he continuously states that he feels like if he could become a millionaire, that girls would like him more. And, you know, money can't buy happiness, y'all. It's just like beauty only being skin deep. Money's not going to buy happiness, but he doesn't see it that way. He just sees that this could just like turn his whole life around. So, I don't know. Mom meets with dad, and they decide that maybe he needs a new start. He needs to go somewhere new because they're starting to see how sad he is. They've comforted him during the crying fits and things like that, and they're, you know, really understanding to say, you know, maybe we need to get him out, get him a new start somewhere, and try to start him over. So they're going to get him a place of his own. They're going to send him over to Santa Barbara, and they're going to send him to school there, and he's just going to have a great time, right? Well, he loves this idea because he's got in his mind that he's going to go live out the scenes of the movie Alpha Dog, which was based in Santa Barbara, I believe. And he is just going to just blow up over there and have the best time ever. And the parents are amazing. They set him up with an apartment. They are going to pay for his tuition. They give him a car. And then I think he's got $500 a month to spend outside of these expenses that they're covering. So, you know, he's happy as a short-legged pony in a high field of oats at this point. He's going to go and have all his parties and live out his life. Just going to be great, right? And it's going to last about 5 minutes, okay? So he gets on there and starts, you know, engaging with his college roommates, actually starts a YouTube channel at this point. So Elliot becomes a YouTuber, and he starts talking about his loneliness and things like that on there. And I think kind of frequenting some online communities that were really associated with a lot of misogyny and anti-feminism. And this fuels that fire that's already in there and starts to really feed it. And solidifies that his feelings are valid, and our feelings are valid, right? But sometimes, even though they're valid, we might not need to have them encouraged. We might need to get some help for them. But instead, he's getting encouragement here. So in June of 2011, he has moved to Isla Vista, and he is going to start attending Santa Barbara. So I'll get this right in a minute. Y'all know I'm going to mispronounce all the words and all the places, so I'm so sorry. Santa Barbara City College. And this would change his life and the world around him and the people that ever encountered Elliot Rodger forever. He did not make it very long, about 8 months before he dropped out of school in February of 2012. He dropped out because he became enraged in finding out a girl that he thought was pretty there had a boyfriend. And he's moving in and out with housemates because he can't quite get along with his roommates. The first set, I think he moves in with, he gets upset with a young man who comes over to visit his roommates, who he calls an ugly. These are his words. Let me be very, very clear. An ugly black boy who can get girls, and is talking about his escapades with a beautiful blonde white girl. Now, again, very clear that those are his words. So just know that those are very hate-filled words, I feel like, too. There was no need to have to call those things out, but he did. So I'm giving you context there. But he's very mad because he says he's from British aristocracy, and this guy is, you know, from nothing. So he deserves the relationship, not this individual, which, holding opinions to the end, okay? Holding opinions to the end. No, I'm not. That's crappy to say. Elliot, that's crappy. Don't do that. Don't anybody do that. That's horrible. And I know I'm just a girl on the internet with too much to say, but that's ugly to say something like that's what that is. That boy wasn't ugly. That was ugly to say. So don't do that. Don't do that. That's your big sister Misty telling you how to behave for the day. But he started doing just some really erratic things. He started taking shots of vodka and would go and walk around town or sit like at tables at like a bookstore or a cafe or something, and then get real upset that girls aren't talking to him. And, you know, this one I struggled with because girls have been told our whole lives. We've seen all the after school specials and things like that we know not to go talk to the drunk guy in the corner, right? That we don't know. Probably a bad idea. Probably why they weren't talking to you. Not because they didn't like you. Not because you probably weren't a likable person. I mean, even by, I guess, the just, definition. It's not like he was an unattractive person or whatever. He kind of fit that stereotypical look, but you see somebody kind of drunk in the corner, you're probably not going to go over there and talk to them unless, you're somebody who's going to go like ask them if they need, you need them call a ride for you. I don't guess there was Uber back then, but whatever, they could call to get you home safely. But he just starts having these outbursts too in public. Like he talks about, wanting to throw hot coffee on couples that he sees kissing, and he actually does throw coffee on some at one point. And he talks about having fantasies of unaliving them, bursting into their room with a weapon and unaliving them and stripping them of their skin and just going erratic on them. Again, this is where we start to see like people this is why people have made some connections to old Bryan and the Idaho Four thing. But he throws, I think, a Starbucks on a couple his Starbucks drink on a couple that he sees kissing in line at the coffee shop. He pulls up to two girls at a stop sign, and because they don't smile back at him and he's driving a BMW and all these things, he throws coffee on them and he's mad because it wasn't hot enough to burn them. It's just a whole lot of things that really start to show how erratic he's becoming. And around, I think, July of 2013, he goes to this party and he tries to talk to these two girls, and they don't want to really talk to him. They're probably at this party with their boyfriends, who knows. And so he tries to push them off of a 10-foot drop, like a 10-foot ledge. Well, the guys at the party see what's going on, and being guys who don't want to watch this dude attack two young girls, they go over and take it up and they toss his butt over the 10-foot ledge. And handle it. Well, then he goes back later to retrieve his sunglasses that apparently were his prized possession. And these guys see him come back to the party and assume the worst, like I probably would. And they attack him. And right, wrong, or indifferent, they probably should have just maybe called the police, but they attack him. Elliot turns around, goes and reports this to the police, and the police blame him for being the aggressor. And as you can imagine, he does not care for this situation at all. And this is where he starts formulating what he calls the day of retribution and what will be his ultimate rebellion. So this marks the turning point where he has decided that it is time to take out his aggression on the greater good of people. The manifesto is called The Story of Elliot Rodger, My Twisted World. And it culminates with him talking about fulfilling his day of retribution. He tries to put it on pause a couple of times and goes and buys like just hundreds of dollars worth of lottery tickets, again trying to achieve this millionaire fantasy that he has, that will turn his whole world around. As you can guess, that doesn't work out for him. He doesn't have it. He doesn't end up winning the lottery. So he begins squirreling away money that his grandmother is sending him and starts buying weapons and procuring several so that he can carry out this act. Getting in his head here, it's terrifying when you read these things, that to see the dark place that he is in and that he just paints a picture of for you. And his parents are noticing these changes in him too. And they try their best to do what they can do. And they get him a psychiatrist. They even have him a counselor that works on his social skills. And then they see, I think around April 30th of 2014, they see his YouTube channel. And it terrifies them. They're like, whoa, this is bad. This is not how we want our son acting. So they call the police. The police come and perform a welfare check on him. Things seem to be fine. He doesn't meet any kind of criteria for them to involuntarily hold him on his mental health based on what they discussed with him. So there was no reason to search his apartment. And he's very excited that they don't, because he said this obviously could have thrown a wrench in his plan, right? Because they would have found all these weapons that he's been procuring. And he writes in his manifesto, his final passage, and I'm going to read this verbatim. I didn't start this war. I wasn't the one who struck first, but I will finish it by striking back. I will punish everyone. It will be beautiful. Finally, at long last, I can show the world my true worth. And this is really chilling, guys, for what I'm about to tell you happened next. I got chills again just reading it, because it's just listen. On May 23rd, 2014, Elliot carried out the day of retribution that he spoke about in the manifesto. It began in his apartment with his roommates, James Hong and George Chen, and their friend David Wang. Investigators believe that he began with David, moved to James, and then finally on to George. Each one was multiple times, which ultimately led to the end of their lives. Then around 9/17, he uploaded his final YouTube video titled Elliot Rodger's Retribution, and he sent his manifesto to 34 different people, including parents, family members, his therapists, former school teachers, and his childhood friends. He then made his way to Alpha Phi sorority house, where it was near the University of California in Santa Barbara campus, and he knocked on the door, and thank God these girls didn't answer the door. They didn't answer the door, because he was planning on hurting them. So instead he turns around and he opens fire on some Tri-Delt sisters who were outside, just happened to be standing outside. Catherine Cooper and Veronica Weiss were taken instantly, and Bianca DeCock was wounded, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering her name. He drove on into the town of Isla Vista, and he attacked the Isla Vista Deli Mart, where he stayed inside his car, but he shot through the windows. And he unalived Christopher Michael Martinez, who succumbed to his injuries inside the market. Christopher was a student at the local university and was described by everyone that knew him as having a bright future ahead of him, as were these girls. And to my knowledge, he had never met any of these individuals. So, scary. He sped away. He was seen by officers on foot patrol who knew about the attacks and were starting to hear about him, but they didn't suspect him at the time. All this is just happening, so, no fault of theirs. But he continued on, and he kept unloading his weapon on innocent pedestrians. He was trying to strike people with his car. In total, he wounded 12 in this phase of his attack, including opening up on his weapon on some patrons at a pizza restaurant. Finally, a sheriff's deputy figured out that he was the perpetrator, and he began exchanging some fire with Elliot. Elliot managed to escape him unharmed, and finally, after all this turmoil, was cornered near the corner of Little Acorn Park, and he was injured by these police officers. They did him in the hip, and he fled, but the police were staying on his tail, and he ended up crashing his BMW, which when they were able to get to the BMW, they found out that he had unalived himself, and that was what caused the crash. In the process of the crash, he also injured a bicyclist. And this poor guy, I think his name was Keith Chang, was also thought to be involved at first, because the officers have no idea what's going on, didn't know if this guy jumped out of the car or what happened. But he was cleared, and he survived his injuries. So thankful that there was a good outcome out of that. But his YouTube video was found a few days after the attack. It's since been deleted from the site, but again, you can find clips out there, especially on the news media. They did want to take it down, though, because they didn't want copycats to do this. And, honestly, I'm not sure. There's probably already so many things out there that people would be supportive of this, that there might already be copycats in the works. So I don't know that taking it down did much, but I'm glad that they tried to do something. And what they found out later on was that Elliot also was on his way to his father's house to take out his stepmother and that baby brother of his, because he believed the baby brother was going to grow up to be what he despised so much, like these guys. So he waited until his father was out of town. So there was manipulation here, and there was thought, and it was so well planned and orchestrated. But they didn't find his roommates until a few days later, after they identified Elliot. They knew he had gone on the rampage in town, but they didn't know the just absolute rampage that took place in his apartment and the havoc that was there. They later discovered them and their bodies. So this is
this story is hard. So now we get to my opinion point in this story. This is a very hard case for me. I think because you read through it and I don't think there's anybody in their life that hasn't felt some kind of isolation. I mean, we all live through COVID at this point, so there was isolation through that for people. And there's heartbreak, there's angst, there's not feeling like you belong, you're trying to find your way in life. There's all those things, but we have to understand when we might need help if our mental health is suffering. And I won't even get into the mental health crisis in this country. I think I live in the United States, if you haven't figured that out, but it is bad, and we know that, and I don't have a fix for it, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have all the answers, because I don't. But I do commend his parents for trying. My heart goes out to him feeling the way he felt about being scared to approach people and isolated and things like that. But, you can't act this way, and you can't take it out on other people. And you can't, I think about like myself, right? I would have been someone he hated because I'm married in a relationship, and he would have hated me and my husband because of that. And he doesn't know us at all. And that's terrifying. And that's not the way we can live our lives and things like that. So I don't know. People are linking him to Bryan Kohlberger. They're saying Bryan Kohlberger is this type of person too, and that's why he took out his rage on the Idaho Four. I don't know. Obviously, he is innocent until proven guilty, and we don't know what that outcome is going to be, but we do know what Elliot's was because he documented it so well for us. And if you're experiencing this type of mental health crisis, or you feel these ways and you feel like there's no way out and you want to incite violence and things like that, I just want to PSA encourage you to get some help and go speak to a professional. Definitely you deserve to have a wonderful life. Everyone does. And, it may be something that can be fixed by just, seeking that help that you need. So please definitely do talk to someone. And if you see these type of red flags going on, in someone in your life, definitely throw up a red flag and try to report it or talk to someone, because poor, George and Catherine and Bianca and all these individuals that were killed as a part of this, they didn't deserve this. They didn't know him. They didn't do anything. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And my heart breaks for their families. And this is the scariest type of violent act in my opinion, because they didn't see this coming. They didn't know. They couldn't prepare for this. They're standing outside, the two girls. I'm thinking about them in my college life. We would have been doing the same thing, standing outside the sorority house chatting, probably talking about what I was going to do that weekend, talking about my boyfriend, talking about, our chapter meeting we just had or something like that. And nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. Typical, normal life. And then all of a sudden, you're just attacked. It breaks my heart, and it's scary. And I hope if you're experiencing anything like these feelings, that you definitely do seek the help that you desperately need. I don't know. I want to hear you guys' opinion in the comments below. I'm tearing up, listening, saying that, because it's a lot to take in. It's scary that there are people out there that are experiencing these kind of feelings and want to go and inflict violence on people that they just think, I guess, have an unfair advantage over them or something like that. So I want to hear what you guys think. I want to know your opinion. If you have an opinion, if you think that the Idaho Four case could be something like this, definitely let me know. If you want to hear a deep dive on Idaho Four, even though, like I said, a lot of creators have kind of already done that one. If you want to hear my take on it, I'll be happy to do that for you. Otherwise, I may hold that one until we know a little bit more at trial, just because new facts are coming out all the time. Bryan, again, innocent until proven guilty, but, we have heard a lot of the rumors and things that have come out about him. So really interested to see what they bring out at trial. And if you read more about some of these incel linked attacks and you want to chat about those in the comments, definitely do. But please be respectful and be kind. Always choose kindness, especially in the comment section below, because we never know who's reading it. And at the end of the day, all of these are real people, and they all have family members that are still out there. I think about Elliot's little sister out there. She's forever linked to this guy and what he did. And she deserves to live a normal life, right? And not have to see terrible things about her family constantly in the comments. So, we want to be kind to her, even if what her brother did was definitely something that was unspeakable and unthinkable. She is in no way linked to that other than through family, by blood, by her name. She's not responsible for that at all. And either, want to, just be kind and make sure that, if she reads anything, that she absorbs that with kindness as well. Same thing with his friends, and all sorts of folks like that. It is very clear in his manifesto that most of those friends stepped away from his life when they saw him getting erratic like this, because they didn't want to be associated with it. And I completely understand that, being fearful of being around somebody who's acting in that way. And I'm sure those friends and the folks and the young girls that have read this manifesto and read his anger towards them have been terrified enough through that and what actually happened to know that it easily could have been one of them, but just because of the way that he chose to act out. So with that, and that heavy one, I am going to stop talking, stop rambling. This has been a lot to unpack today, you guys, but I am so thankful if you stuck with me. I'm thankful for you being back, and I would love it if you would smash that like button and smash that subscribe button, because it is a free way to help your girl out and keep this channel going and allow me to bring you more true crime all the time. And until next time, I hope that you will have a great week, a great day. Stay safe out there and stay sweet, my cupcakes. And I will see you next time. Bye.